tips for dealing with the bank. So perhaps you're renting in a property where it is run by a body corporate.
Understanding the basic calculation, income minus expenses, and you want to be left with a positive income.
It is a very tough game. It's not easy at all.
To stay ahead of knowing exactly what your clients need, what their teething issues are.
Have a joint move-in inspection.
That a lot of people that are coming into sectional title homeowners associations are, just like you described, not only first-time homeowners, but first-time owners and residents in community schemes.
They get to see the perspective from the other side of the aisle. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
It's a market that's estimated to be transacting at least 9 billion rand per year. So it's a huge market.
In order to get there, you need to be able to build up a track record.
Your cash flow model needs to be sharp.
A quote comes to mind. The best time to buy a property was about 10 years ago. The next best time is now.
Good evening and welcome to episode 58 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Kumalo. It's the Thursday edition of the show. You can see the bundles are slowly running out. It's that weekend fatigue slightly starting to set in. But of course, we're bringing you the latest edition of the Private Property Podcast, where we're talking all things property. And this evening, we're looking at the ins and outs of the levy and rental collection during lockdown. I'm sure a lot of us have had, whether running with our tenants or our landlords when it comes to rental collection, or perhaps some of you have had that running with your body corporate when it comes to the levy collection. We'll be understanding the intricacies of that collection and also what happens when a party defaults, what are the legal steps one should be following. And of course, we're also going to be running that competition where we are giving away 5,000 rands to one lucky viewer. And of course, we'll be announcing that lucky winner at the end of the show. So you certainly want to stay tuned to that one. We are running our weekly competition, and of course, we'll be announcing the winner tomorrow. And all you have to do to stand a chance of winning one of two 1,000 rand prizes is tell us what your property goals, dreams, and ambitions are. It's that simple. And you stand a chance of winning one of two 1,000 rand prizes. But let's get to this evening's conversation. I'm sure, a lot of us have had quite a number of question marks. Perhaps some of your tenants have been unable to pay. Perhaps you're a landlord who hasn't been able to cover their levies during this particular period. We certainly want to understand the best ways to handle the matter. And helping us to better understand it, I'm joined this evening by Simon Thomson, who is the director at BBM Attorneys. Good evening, Simon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So I think, Simon, perhaps let's just look at how levy collection essentially works, because I actually don't want to take this one for granted. I certainly know that a lot of us, myself included, when I bought, the first two properties I bought were into a sectional title. And so we had a body corporate. I wasn't quite sure of what the intricacies of even levy collection was. I saw, towards the end of the month, I started receiving emails. And so it was all quite unfamiliar territory. So perhaps first just give us a breakdown of how that levy collection essentially works in most of the body corporates or homeowners associations.
Yeah, so the trustees of the body corporate or the managing agent would contact us and say, look, we've got this defaulter. It's normally at about 60 days in arrears. They will then send us an instruction, and we will then send out a letter of demand, giving them 14 days to respond to bring their payments up to date. If they don't, the trustees or the managing agent will then tell us to issue a summons. That's a fairly simple process of preparing a summons, sending it to court to have it issued, and then a sheriff will serve it on the relevant debtor. And the process can take a bit of time. It's not a very quick thing where you can sort it out in a couple of days. It does take a couple of weeks. So the managing agents and body corporates just need to keep an eye on certain debtors who don't pay or are delinquent non-payers, and they can rack up quite a few months of arrears. You've got to reissue summonses every couple of months just to make sure you don't lose out when they do make payment or partial payments, that you can deal with it at a later stage. If they still don't pay after receiving a summons, you would then apply to court for a default judgment, and at the same time have a warrant issued. Once your warrant is issued, you send the sheriff out to their unit, and that's normally the time that a debtor will get in contact with us. It's not very nice having someone coming knocking on your door saying, I want to take your tables and chairs. And that's normally when matters settle. But by that time, the debtors incur quite a bit of costs involved in dealing with that whole process. So best thing to do is pay your levies as and when they due. But if you have to go through that whole process, you're looking at about 2-3 months to collect those arrears.
Maybe someone, let's go slightly, a few steps back and almost take our viewers through what is happening at each stage. Because as you say, there's, issuing a letter of demand. And I know, for example, often isn't just one letter. Perhaps let's go through what happens that first month when you essentially miss your levy payment. What kind of communication are you going to be receiving from, whether it's the instructions from the attorneys or perhaps you're receiving it from the managing agent, before we get all the way to a warrant of arrest?
So, before we go down that whole route, the managing agent or the trustees of the body corporate will send us an email and say, here's the debtor at such and such a unit. We will then do a Windeed search and just get the relevant details that we need. We'll prepare a letter and we send it out by registered mail. We give them 14 days within which to make payment. And it's a fairly simple thing to just send out a letter. We also try and email and contact them. We just find the best thing to do is to try and get hold of someone directly. They will then either discuss the matter, you kind of know where you stand. If the person's struggling, sometimes I'll be like, look, just give me a few extra days to make payment, and then you can sort it out without having to go the whole legal route. And after 14 days, then we contact the managing agent to say, listen, what do you want to do now? We couldn't get hold of them, or we could get hold of them, and this is what they said. How would you like to proceed? It's completely up to the trustees and managing agent on what they want to do and how they want to handle it. So that's the first step. After that, it's a summons. If you do get the instruction to prepare the summons, you would have the Windeed attached. You prepare the particulars of claim and the summons, and then you would have the summons issued, which is you make various copies, go get it issued at court. You would then have to go deliver it to the sheriff. The sheriff would then have to take the summons and he'll knock on your door and hand you the summons. If you're not there, he'll just tape it to the front of your door. After that, you've got 10 days within which to defend the summons, enter in a notice of appearance to defend. If you don't do that, then again, we will contact the managing agent, and then we would apply for a default judgment, which is a fairly simple process where we, you just tell the magistrate that you have served a summons, the 10 days have elapsed, they haven't taken any steps, please can we have judgment in whatever amount it is, and magistrates will grant you that judgment. Sometimes you have to appear in court, sometimes they do it over the counter, just it varies court to court. And once that's done, you then immediately apply for a warrant to be issued as well. And it's a warrant, it's a warrant that gives you the power to go to attach movable property.
So, so Simon, you were mentioning earlier that sometimes after that letter of demand has been sent and you contact the defaulting party, they're, often able to say, listen, I've been struggling, perhaps give me a few days. How are you finding that that's actually effective? Because I think certainly a lot of people who've probably received letters of demands, especially during this period, because I think we must almost be mindful that this is probably the one time when there are going to be a number of people who likely default, especially on something like levies that doesn't automatically go off. And even some of the amounts that are going off automatically may default because there simply might not be funds in people's bank accounts. So in the event where they, say that they're struggling, usually how much window period are you able to essentially give them? I mean, I know the letter of demand would have X number of days, but suppose within those 20 days, they still wouldn't have been able to cover the fee. How much grace period are they able to reasonably negotiate so that the legal process doesn't essentially continue?
So that's, you deal with that on a case-by-case basis. The best thing you can do is to talk. If a debtor speaks to us, we can find out where they are. For some people, as I've been retrenched and I don't know when I'm going to find another job, and those are a bit more difficult because you can't sort of make arrangements or plan around it. I know some people have said, look, I've been laid off temporarily for 2 months, so please give me a 2-month payment holiday, and I will make up those payments in 2 months' time. There are a number of ways you can deal with it, and you would need to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. I would request proof of whatever a debtor was saying. If she said it's retrenched, I would need proof of that, because a lot of people are trying to take chances at the same time. They're saying, well, payment holiday, I'm not paying my rent now, and claiming all sorts of reasons to not make payment or get out of it. So, you've got to be careful and just make sure that they can show what they're saying is in fact correct. But some people are finding themselves in a really difficult position right now.
Yeah, no, you certainly are. And I think it's such an unprecedented time that even you're on the receiving end, meaning, whether you're the attorney or you're the board of trustees and have to make decisions about how much leeway you're essentially going to give, it is difficult because we understand that this is something that isn't just happening to South Africa, but it's certainly happening in a global scale. We're of course taking your questions and comments at home if you've ever had any issues when it comes to especially levy collection or perhaps not being charged adequately, and you want to find out what the legal steps are when it comes to that. Do send through your questions. Simon, we've got a question here coming in from James Ramabu, who asks, how do I deal with the body corporate that keeps on charging me penalties even if I pay my levies on time?
Well, that depends on the rules and whether there are penalty provisions and what the penalties are for. If those penalties are for breaching conduct rules, and those penalties are specifically provided for in the rules and that they can be placed on your levy statement, then you might have to pay those fines. You should have an opportunity to be able to dispute the fines and discuss it with the trustees. But otherwise, normally, if it's not dealt with in the rules, the trustees can't just put a fine on your levy account and expect you to pay it.
And I mean, I can imagine that oftentimes a lot of us may have sometimes had issues with body corporates, whether you're not charged adequately. Sometimes you have question marks around, the electricity billing, especially when you're living in units where it's not prepaid electricity, but it's a metered electricity. So especially right now, I mean, we certainly saw when we had that hard lockdown, they weren't able to come in to read the meters. And a part of you thinks there's no way that my electricity bill would have gone up so significantly. And it does create quite a bit of tension with the body corporate that you're dealing with, Simon. And I think oftentimes we do struggle to find different ways to remedy it. And I think perhaps it might even be because a lot of times we get a sense that the body corporates know more and have relatively more authority. and they could do more harm than we could do while we're living in the respective homes that we are living in. I want us to actually go for a quick break, Simon. And after the break, I want us to look at, the rental collection, because this is one of those sticky ones that certainly a lot of landlords are finding themselves in, but also tenants are struggling with. I mean, I've certainly I've heard rather of tenants saying that their landlords are increasing rental out of the blue, and they don't know how to best deal with it. They can't move right now. Where they're currently staying is convenient for, for home, for work. And so trying to find a new place during this period is not convenient for them. So really looking at what are some of the intricacies of dealing with late rental payment, especially during level 4 lockdown, and what landlords can do to remedy, when their tenants are essentially not paying on time. If you have any questions or comments when it comes to late payment, whether it's of levies or of your rental, do send them through. We'll be addressing them just after this break. Welcome back to episode 58 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Khumalo. This evening, we're talking about the ins and outs of levy and rental collection during level 3 lockdown. And to help us better understand what we can and cannot do, especially from a legal perspective, I'm joined by Simon Thomson, who's a director at BBM Attorneys. Now, Simon, I did say that before the break, one of the things that I certainly wanted us to explore, of course, is the rental aspect of today's conversation. And we're already getting quite a number of comments and questions from our viewers at home. The first one coming in from Bongogile Ngobo, who asks, I'm really interested in the rental collection issue. One of my tenants hasn't been paying due to the lockdown situation, but however, she's back at work and now she's telling me she still doesn't have money to pay. Is it a wise decision for me to kick her out or give her a 3-month notice of eviction?
Well, before you take steps to do anything, I think she should really look at the provisions in her lease. I don't think she can just kick her out without a court order in place. She would need to take steps to have her evicted. What she can do is check her lease to see the breach clause. What are the requirements in terms of her breach clause? How much notice must she give to say she's in arrears for let's say it's 2 months arrears. You've got to give 20 days notice, for example. She gives those 20 days notice and then cancels the lease and takes steps to have her evicted. But that is a separate application to collecting the arrears. And she's entitled to issue summons for the arrear rentals while she's still in her property.
And I think, one of the things that a lot of landlords right now are struggling with are the different legal mechanisms they can go about collecting their rental. We've certainly covered right here on the Private Property Podcast I think it was the rental pack that TPM Credit Bureau came up with, and it was essentially during the more hard lockdown, was for that 21-day period, because they were already anticipating that there's very likely going to be some people who will probably not pay, and so created this lease pack to assist certainly landlords and tenants to not just have a verbal conversation, but take what they verbally agreed to and put it down on a legal document that's binding, whether it is giving the landlord, permission to use a certain percentage of the deposit, and then trying to put in place the different ways that that amount would essentially be paid back. It's certainly something that, we're struggling with. And I think a lot of landlords probably didn't spend enough time, perhaps even working on their lease agreement, because they never thought that this is something they'd make provision for. You were saying, when you're answering our previous question, that you almost need to look at what the lease says. What are some of the things that lease agreements should have in order to almost proactively deal with something like this? Because I think there's certainly some landlords who are about to get into new lease agreements with their tenants. What should we be putting in our lease agreements to be able to effectively deal with non-payment?
So first and foremost, for non-payment, you would need a breach clause, and quite a clear breach clause, which complies with the Consumer Protection Act and other legislation that's relevant. So it would say, if you default, it must specifically say the date your amounts are due. If you default, how many, after giving them notice in writing, how many days they have to remedy that. If they don't, set out the consequences of cancellation and threatening legal action to come after the arrear rental. I think breach clauses are quite important. People are starting to realize the importance of a force majeure clause to deal with things like COVID-19 and things like that. But as long as you know what your lease says and that you're able to talk to it and you remember it, when he doesn't pay, you must know, okay, I must write him a letter now, giving him that time period so that I'm not messed around later on down the line. And make sure it is done very specifically as to what the lease says. It says it in your letter of demand so that there's no confusion later on or wiggle room.
Yeah.
But yeah, that should cover it.
And we've got a question here from, this is from Bruno De Santos, who says, okay, so if I don't pay, I get a summons against me. So what happens if I do pay my levies on time, but they both, the body corporate and the trustees, don't answer my emails on the way forward on fixing structural damage or walls due to poor building practices, and still within my 5-year warranty on structures or my other property, the windows and entry door leak during the rainy seasons?
So we're going back to the levy space now. He's paying his levies, but the building's not being maintained.
But they're not, so it's the other party now that isn't meeting their half of the their part of the bargain, because essentially when we pay levies, we also pay for them to do certain activities.
Yeah, so I think he can write them a letter, setting it out, saying what needs to be done, and if they still don't, the trustees still don't do anything about that, you must look at going to CSOS to try and enforce compliance. I think that's the next step.
And I think on CSOS, we've actually got a question here from Zelinda van der Merwe, who asks, how do you see the community scheme ombud service role in collections?
So we have been going to court with levy collections. We found it to be a much quicker, more efficient process, and it really is working well. I know you can go to CSOS and it is cheaper, but there's much longer delays. They're not always adequately dealt with. I had a matter just this week. A client came to see me where there was a dispute within a body corporate. He went there with his CSOS application. My client didn't know about it, and so he didn't attend the adjudication. While she was there, the lady said, yeah, but he's also not paying his levies. So the adjudicator made an order and said that he must pay all his levies up to date and dealt with a few other things. The trustee then went to court and got a warrant of execution at the High Court for 2.5 million rand, which is now serving on his client. So you must be careful. It doesn't always go your way, although it definitely went the body corporate's way in that situation. But now you've got to go to court, have the warrant set aside, and try and deal with the other issues at the body corporate. So we prefer the courts. We've got fee structures in place, so you don't get any surprises when you get your bill. We have a set fee for the letter of demand, a set fee for the summons, a set fee for the default judgment and the warrant. We don't charge you for telephone calls and following up with you over the phone. We don't. We give you a spreadsheet detailing each and every matter in respect of each building, which you'll get on a weekly basis. Some people find that's too much, so we'll give it to them on a monthly basis, but you'll be able to know where every single matter is and at what stage. With a little comment section to say there's a delay, this is what it is, or we managed to do this, we're just waiting for the magistrate to sign off, but it's there and everything's in process. So we just found it much easier to go through the court system.
The moment you mentioned that 2.5 million, I looked up in shock and horror. And there's actually a question, a different question, still from Zelinda van der Merwe, who of course we've had right here on the Private Property Podcast. You can go back to some of our older episodes where we've spoken to her exactly about the issue of what the role of the community scheme ombuds play, as well as when we're talking about the different community schemes and the function that they certainly have. And the other question that she actually asked was, she says, tell us about the most interesting levy collection or eviction matter you have had to deal with in your career.
My career, I've had some pretty silly ones where a lady has an issue with a cat which would jump into her unit, and she went on holiday for the weekend, closed the door, and the cat just went mad in her unit, got stuck, it ripped off her blind and messed her chairs and couches and stuff. And we went to the High Court to fight over this little cat. She wanted this little cat to get rid of the little cat. I thought that wasn't that interesting, but I thought it was crazy that this amount of money and this amount of emotion and the feelings involved were quite high. So that was a very memorable one.
Yeah.
Then there's all cases are different, but it's always people sort of having an argument at each other's throats. Some of them are quite petty, some of them are legitimate, but I find the petty issues are the more difficult to deal with. And the big issues, people can see reason and know what needs to be done and sort it out. So it's interesting. It's always fun and games.
And you're not. One thing, I certainly never wish to be a lawyer, because like you're saying, you either get the very petty issues, and more often than not in petty issues, one side has a deep pocket and they've got the time to pursue that petty matter, and everybody else is thinking this is not that big. We could literally just solve this over a cup of tea and everybody's going to be fine. But in issues that are not so petty, Simon, we've got a question here from Pamela Mashego, who asks, is it compulsory for rental agencies to repay the deposit plus the interest?
Well, it depends whether there's been damage to the property. The rental deposit is there to cover the landlord in case there is an issue when the tenant moves out. So you need to have the outgoing inspection, and if everything's fine, then yes, absolutely, it must be paid with interest.
And I think that's certainly one of the things that some landlords, especially new landlords, are probably not so aware of. It's what happens to the deposit money, because oftentimes you know to put a deposit, whether it's a month's deposit, perhaps sometimes even longer. But a lot of landlords, especially micro landlords, you find often don't put that deposit in an interest-bearing account. They often use the money for whatever purpose, and when the rental agreement or when the lease agreement expires, they're more likely to just give the tenant the exact amount, or sometimes even not give them, and tenants don't know how to remedy that. Perhaps it's to have that as a last question. What can then tenants do in the event where the landlord is not giving them their rental amount back? And this is given, let's assume, for example, an exit inspection has been done and nothing was flagged as being wrong or damaged, so there's nothing that needs to be fixed after you've moved out. What can a tenant essentially do in the event where a landlord is withholding their deposit amount?
So a tenant in that situation should take it to the Rental Housing Tribunal. I think that's the best way to go. You don't necessarily need lawyers and all of that to go with you. You can do it on your own. It might be better to have a lawyer just give a once over to make sure you tick the necessary boxes. Either that or go to court and claim it back. But landlords don't have a great reputation for handling the deposit. I know of landlords who've used the deposit, they haven't put in an interest-bearing account, and then get annoyed when they have to pay out a bit more to cover the interest and. So yeah, and they use it for maintenance during the lease, and yeah, no, it's a bone of contention which comes up often.
Simon, before I let you go, any final tips, certainly for whether it's landlords or tenants who live in body corporates, in terms of how to best handle whether it's levy collection or their rental collection, especially during this particular lockdown?
Especially during this lockdown, I think the best thing you can do, and obviously it's relationship dependent, but if you can speak to your landlord or speak to your tenant and or the trustees or whoever you need to just talk about the matter and try to come to an amicable resolution. There's a number of ways you can work it out, and it's something which can be resolved and sorted out. And if you talk, you know where you stand, you know where it's going to be, and people often adhere to those. I'm dealing with a lot where we've done acknowledgements of debts and things like that, and we're having no problems. The landlords are giving a break and saying, look, sign this AOD so I'm covered, but this, I'm happy with the arrangement, and both parties are happy and moving forward.
Simon, we're going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And that is Simon Thomson, who's a director at BBM Attorneys. We're going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, it's that time of the evening where we give away 5,000 Rand to one lucky viewer at home who entered that 100,000 Rand competition. We'll be back just after this. Tips for dealing with the bank. So perhaps you're renting in a property where it is run by a body corporate.
Understanding the basic calculation, income minus expenses, and you want to be left with a positive income.
It is a very tough game. It's not easy at all.
To stay ahead of knowing exactly what your clients need, what their teething issues are.
Have a joint move-in inspection.
That a lot of people that are coming into sectional title homeowners associations are, just like you described, not only first-time homeowners, but first-time owners and residents in community schemes.
They get to see the perspective from the other side of the aisle. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
It's a market that's estimated to be transacting at least 9 billion Rand per year. So it's a huge market.
In order to get there, you need to be able to build up a track record.
Your cash flow model needs to be sharp.
A quote comes to mind. The best time to buy a property was about 10 years ago. The next best time is now.
Welcome back to episode 58 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Khumalo. It's that time of the evening where we give away money. We are, of course, giving away 5,000 Rand to one lucky winner or one lucky, participant who participated, of course, in that 500,000 Rand competition that we ran a few weeks ago. We're just about ready to press that button. And of course, nearly 46,000 names went into this particular one. I'm sure that a lot of you have been waiting to see if your name is going to be called up. We have been giving away those 5,000 Rand prizes for the past couple of episodes. And there are really 3 simple rules to this one. And I'm sure that a lot of you who watch every day might be a bit tired, but we must repeat them because there are probably people who are watching us for the first time. And to all our new viewers at home, we're saying welcome, welcome, welcome. It's really great to have you join us this evening. Of course, those 3 golden rules for our lucky competition is that the competition is only open to the people who entered that 100,000 Rand competition. And this, of course, includes estate agents who are not employees of private property. The winner will be randomly selected at the end of the episode, and we'll announce them live right here on air. And the third golden rule is that private property team will be calling the lucky winner to verify their details within 24 hours. It's really important that you pick up that call so that we can verify your details. In the event where we're unable to reach you, then the prize money will roll over to the following day. Well, I'm ready to see who's going to be this evening's winner. We've just pressed start on our picker, and we'll see who this evening's lucky winner is. I'm sure, I mean, it's a Thursday, you're probably just chilling at home. The next thing, you're going to get a call on a Friday, find out that you walk away with 5,000 Rand. Those are the kind of calls that I want. I mean, so many of the calls during this lockdown are very anxiety-inducing, but a call telling you you've just won 5,000 Rand is the kind of content that I've certainly signed up for. We'll see this evening's winner. Of course, you still have a chance to enter a competition, and that's that 1,000 Rand competition. But I'll tell you about it in a little bit. And the winner for this competition is Kenneth Tesek. I do apologize. I've just butchered your name so badly. Kenneth, congratulations. You walk away with 5,000 Rands. I feel like I need to find out how to best pronounce his surname, Tesek. I think if I say it fast enough, it might just land. So Kenneth, you walk away with that amazing 5,000 Rand cash prize. Congratulations. The private property team will be calling you to verify your details before handing over that amount. I was saying that for those of us who did not enter this initial competition, you can still enter the competition where you stand a chance of winning one of two 1,000 Rand prizes, and we're giving them away tomorrow evening on Friday, right here on the Private Property Podcast. And all you have to do to stand a chance of winning is to tell us what your property goals, dreams, and aspirations are. It's that simple. You can drop a line right here below the comment, whether it's Facebook or YouTube that you're watching us from, or even share it with us on Twitter, and you stand a chance of winning that 1,000 Rand prize. Well, folks, that's it for me this evening. It's been a really great one. I do hope whether you're a tenant or you're a landlord and you're having troubles, with this month's rental, I mean, it's already the second, so if rent hasn't been received just yet, perhaps there might be, some issues. To just exercise a bit of compassion. I think have a proactive conversation with your tenant or with your landlord and try the best way, to meet each other halfway. We are in this together, and a lot of us know that we haven't quite seen the peak of the peak of the global pandemic that we're currently facing. So it really is important that we try to meet each other halfway as much as possible. That's it for this evening. We're back again tomorrow evening. You do not want to miss it. Until then, I hope you're staying home and staying safe.
I'm Rick Niedling. I'm an Olympic gold medalist and shareholder and marketing director of Levy Estate, which recently acquired Pearl Valley Estate. I've been living in the beautiful Paul Franschhoek Valley for the last 5 years. We are situated right in the heart of the Cape Winelands. Security is our #1 priority, and it's something we work on every day. And this has earned us the reputation of being the safest estate in Africa. The lifestyle that this area has to offer truly is country living at its best. We're just 5 minutes away from the historic town of Paarl. Paarl really is an incredible area to explore, with little gems like the Spice Route and Fairview Farms. But the biggest attraction is the excellent schools. Franschhoek, on the other hand, is a major international tourist destination, and also known as the culinary capital of South Africa, with a diverse offering for every palate and occasion. Our recent acquisition of Pearl Valley is a major game changer for us. Our residents can now enjoy a wide range of amenities unmatched anywhere else in the world. There's the world-famous Jack Nicklaus Signature Golf Course, which is consistently ranked among the top golf courses in South Africa, and there are some beautiful properties on the course. Levy really is the ideal family environment. We also cater to equestrian lovers with facilities on offer for every discipline, from the 2 Hurlingham Standard Polo Fields to our state-of-the-art equestrian centers and miles of trails. Our horses live in paradise too. Levy has its own wine farm and cellars, producing award-winning wines which every resident can be proud of. I've been blessed to travel the world, but this is the place I come home to. I'm sure you can see why we call it the Valley of Life. And this is my neighborhood.
Welcome to your next home. This is the perfect room if you're looking to expand the family. It's perfect. There's a kid's room or a playroom.
Did you say playroom?
Yeah, playroom.
I've been very bad.
You know what, let me give you a moment. I'm gonna feed the pancake.
Yeah, you go feed the...
Tips for dealing with the bank. So perhaps you're renting in a property where it is run by a body corporate.
Understanding the basic calculation, income minus expenses, and you want to be left with a positive income.
It is a very tough game. It's not easy at all.
To stay ahead of knowing exactly what your clients need, what their teething issues are.
Have a joint move-in inspection.
That a lot of people that are coming into sectional title homeowners associations are, just like you described, not only first-time homeowners, but first-time owners and residents in community schemes.
They get to see the perspective from the other side of the aisle. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
It's a market that's estimated to be transacting at least 9 billion rand per year. So it's a huge market.
In order to get there, you need to be able to build up a track record.
Your cash flow model needs to be sharp.
A quote comes to mind. The best time to buy a property was about 10 years ago. The next best time is now.